The wind was howling like a wild animal that night. Robert Hayes sat by his fireplace listening to the storm getting worse outside his small cabin. He was 63 years old and had been living alone on this mountain for 12 long years. His cabin was simple but cozy, with wooden walls that creaked when the wind pushed against them. The fire crackled and popped, the only sound besides the storm that kept him company most nights. Robert liked it this way: quiet, peaceful, no people to worry about, no conversations that went nowhere. Just him, his old dog Chester, and the mountains that stretched out as far as the eye could see. He had built this life carefully after his wife passed away. Back then, he thought his world had ended. They had been trying to have a baby for years, and when his son was finally born, the joy lasted only 3 days before the tiny boy stopped breathing. His wife never recovered from the grief. She died 6 months later, and Robert felt like he died with her, so he sold everything, packed his truck, and drove until he found this cabin. It was falling apart when he bought it, but he fixed it up, gave himself something to do, something to focus on besides the pain, and slowly, year after year, he learned to live with the silence. He told himself he was fine. He didn't need anyone. People just brought pain anyway. But tonight, something felt different. The storm was worse than usual. Snow was coming down so thick he couldn't see past his porch. The temperature had dropped fast, and he knew anyone caught outside wouldn't last long. Robert added another log to the fire and pulled his blanket tighter around his shoulders. Chester, his old hound dog, lifted his head and whined softly. "What's wrong, boy?" Robert asked, reaching down to pat the dog's head. Chester stood up and walked to the door, his tail low. He whined again, louder this time. "Ain't nothing out there but snow," Robert said. "Come back here by the fire." But Chester wouldn't move. He kept staring at the door, and then Robert heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. It was faint, almost lost in the wind, but it was there. Knocking, someone was knocking on his door. Robert's heart jumped. Nobody came up here, especially not in weather like this. He grabbed the flashlight from the table and walked slowly to the door. Chester was barking now, not aggressive but urgent. Robert's hand hesitated on the doorknob. Part of him wanted to ignore it, pretend he didn't hear anything, but another part, the part that still remembered being human, made him turn the knob. The door flew open from the force of the wind, and Robert had to grab it to keep it from slamming against the wall. Snow rushed into the cabin, and standing in the doorway was a woman. She was young, maybe in her 30s, and she was barely standing. Her face was pale, her lips blue from the cold. Blood was running down the side of her face from a cut on her forehead. "Please," she gasped. "Help us." Before Robert could respond, the woman collapsed forward. He caught her just before she hit the floor, his old arms straining under her weight, and that's when he saw them. 3 children standing behind her in the snow. They were huddled together, shaking so badly they could barely stand. The oldest was a girl, maybe 12 years old. She had her arms wrapped around a younger boy and a tiny girl who couldn't have been more than 5. "Get inside." "Now," Robert shouted over the wind. The girl didn't move at first. She just stared at him with these hard, suspicious eyes, like she was trying to decide if he was more dangerous than the storm. "I'm not going to hurt you," Robert said, softer this time. "But you'll freeze to death out there. Come on." The girl finally moved, pulling the other 2 children inside. Robert kicked the door shut behind them and carefully laid the woman down on his couch. She was breathing, but it was shallow and painful. Her leg was bent at a wrong angle, clearly broken. He could see more blood soaking through her jacket on her left side. The children stood frozen by the door, dripping snow and shivering. They looked terrified. Chester walked up to them slowly, his tail wagging gently, trying to be friendly. The little girl reached out a small hand to touch him, but the older girl pulled her back. "He's friendly," Robert said. "Won't hurt nobody. Let me get you some blankets." He moved quickly for an old man, pulling every blanket he owned from the closet. He wrapped one around each child, then added more logs to the fire. The boy was crying quietly, and the little girl's teeth were chattering so loud Robert could hear them across the room. "What's your names?" he asked gently. The older girl spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm Lily. This is my brother Danny, and that's our little sister Rosie." "Okay, Lily, I'm Robert. You're safe now, I promise, but I need to check on this lady here." "Is she your mother?" Lily shook her head. "She's Miss Patricia. She was taking us to a new home." Robert turned back to the woman, Patricia. He had done some medical training back in his army days, long time ago, but he remembered enough. He checked her pulse. Too fast, her skin was clammy. That meant she was going into shock. The head wound wasn't too bad, but that leg and whatever was bleeding inside, that was serious. "Can you call for help?" Lily asked, moving closer. Robert shook his head. "No phone lines up here. And even if I had a cell phone, there's no signal on this mountain. We're trapped until the storm passes. Is she going to die?" The question came from Danny, the boy. He looked about 9 years old. Robert didn't believe in lying to kids. "I don't know, son. I'm gonna do everything I can for her. But she's hurt pretty bad." He spent the next hour doing what he could. He cleaned Patricia's head wound and bandaged it. He tried to set her leg, though he knew it wasn't a proper job. She woke up a few times, crying out in pain, and he gave her some old pain medicine he had in the cabinet. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The children slowly warmed up by the fire. Robert made them hot soup from a can and gave them some bread. They ate like they hadn't seen food in days. Little Rosie fell asleep first, curled up on the rug with Chester lying next to her like a guardian. Danny wasn't far behind, his head nodding forward as he fought to keep his eyes open. Only Lily stayed awake, watching Robert as he sat next to Patricia. The woman was sleeping now, but her breathing was getting worse. Robert knew what that meant. He had seen enough death in his life to recognize when it was coming. "How did you end up out there?" he asked Lily quietly. "The car went off the road," she said. Miss Patricia tried to keep it straight, but the ice was too much. "We crashed into a tree. She got hurt real bad, but she made us get out. Said we had to find help. We walked for a long time. I don't even know how long. Then we saw your light." "You're a brave girl," Robert said, "taking care of your brother and sister like that." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away fast. "I have to be. There's nobody else." Those words hit Robert harder than he expected. He saw himself in this girl, alone, tough because she had to be, protecting what little she had left because she'd already lost so much. The storm raged on outside, and Robert knew they were stuck here for at least a few days. He looked at the 3 sleeping children, then at Patricia's pale face, and felt something shift inside him. Something he thought had died 12 years ago. He didn't know these people. Didn't ask for them to show up at his door. But here they were. And for the first time in a very long time, Robert Hayes felt needed. He just hoped he remembered how to care about people. Because something told him these 3 kids were going to need him more than he could possibly imagine. Patricia died just before sunrise on the 3rd day. Robert had been sitting beside her all night, watching her breathing get weaker and weaker. The children were asleep in his bedroom, all 3 of them squeezed into his bed because they didn't want to be apart. When Patricia opened her eyes that last time, she looked right at Robert with a desperation that cut straight through him. "The children," she whispered, her voice so quiet he had to lean in close to hear. "Don't let them separate the children. Promise me." Robert nodded, his throat tight. "I promise. They've been through so much already. 6 months ago, their parents died in a house fire. Since then, nobody wanted all 3. Too many kids, they said. Too much trouble. But they need each other. They're all they have left." Patricia's hand gripped his weakly. "Please keep them together." Those were her last words. Her hand went limp in his, and just like that, she was gone. Robert sat there for a long moment staring at this woman, who had died trying to save 3 children who weren't even hers. He gently closed her eyes and covered her with a blanket. Then he walked outside into the cold morning air and let himself cry for the first time in years. The storm had finally passed. The world was covered in 3 feet of fresh snow, sparkling white under the rising sun. It looked peaceful, beautiful even, but Robert felt anything but peaceful. He had 3 orphaned children inside his cabin, a dead social worker on his couch, and no idea what to do next. He heard the door open behind him. Lily stepped out, still wrapped in one of his blankets. She looked at him, then at the cabin, and Robert saw in her eyes that she already knew. "She's gone, isn't she?" Lily asked. Robert nodded. "I'm sorry, kid." She tried real hard to hold on. Lily didn't cry. She just stood there, staring out at the snow. What happens to us now? That was the question, wasn't it? Robert knew the right thing to do. Call the sheriff as soon as he could get down the mountain. Let the authorities handle it. These weren't his kids. He didn't know anything about raising children. He was an old man who lived alone because that's exactly how he wanted it. But then he remembered Patricia's words. "Don't separate them." And he remembered his promise. "First, we're going to have some breakfast," Robert said. Then I'm gonna dig out my truck and drive into town. We'll figure out the rest from there. It took him 4 hours to dig out enough snow to make the road passable. The children helped as much as they could. Danny was surprisingly strong for a 9-year-old, and even little Rosie tried to help by carrying small handfuls of snow away. Lily worked in silence, her face set in that hard expression that broke Robert's heart every time he saw it. They wrapped Patricia's body carefully and put her in the back of the truck. It didn't feel right, but there was no other choice. Then they all piled into the front seat. The 3 children squeezed together between Robert and Chester, who insisted on coming along. The drive down the mountain was slow and dangerous. Twice the truck slid on ice, and Robert's heart nearly stopped both times. But they made it to town just after noon. The small mountain town of Pine Ridge looked like a postcard, all covered in snow with smoke rising from chimneys. Robert drove straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Tom Bradley had known Robert for years. They weren't exactly friends, but they respected each other. Tom was a good man, fair and honest. When Robert walked in with 3 children trailing behind him, Tom's eyebrows shot up. "Robert Hayes, I'll be damned. Thought you'd frozen up there. We've been trying to figure out how to check on you." Tom's smile faded when he saw Robert's face. "What happened?" Robert told him everything. About the storm, Patricia showing up at his door, her death, and the children. Tom listened carefully, making notes. When Robert finished, Tom leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "This is a complicated situation," Tom said. "Patricia Chen was transporting these kids to a foster home in the next county. That family's been calling every day, worried sick. Child Services has been going crazy trying to find them." "What happens to the kids now?" Robert asked. Tom looked at the 3 children sitting quietly in the corner. Rosie was curled up against Lily, sucking her thumb. Danny was staring at the floor. Lily was watching Tom with those suspicious, guarded eyes. "Well, they'll go into the system. Probably split them up into different homes since most folks can't take 3 kids at once." Tom saw Robert's expression and held up his hand. "I know, I don't like it either. But that's how it works. What if someone wanted to take all 3? Robert heard himself say. "Temporarily, I mean. Until you find someone who can keep them together permanent." Tom stared at him. "You volunteering?" "Maybe I am." "Robert, you live in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. You're 63 years old. You got no experience with kids. The state's gonna have a lot of questions." "I know all that," Robert said. "But these kids have been through enough. And I promised their social worker I'd keep them together. A promise is a promise." Tom studied him for a long moment. Then he stood up. "Let me make some calls. No guarantees, but I'll see what I can do." It took 2 days of phone calls and meetings. Robert had to fill out more paperwork than he'd ever seen in his life. They did a background check, inspected his cabin, asked him 1,000 questions. The county social services were overwhelmed and understaffed. When Tom vouched for Robert, calling him a decorated veteran and a man of his word, they finally agreed to a temporary arrangement. Temporary. That word followed Robert everywhere. The kids could stay with him temporarily while they looked for a permanent foster family willing to take all 3. It could be weeks or months, they said. Robert told himself that was fine. He was just helping out until they found someone better. But something strange started happening in those first few weeks. The cabin, which had been silent for 12 years, came alive. Danny was full of questions about everything. How did Robert chop wood? Where did that bird come from? What kind of tree was that? Robert found himself talking more in a single day than he had in entire months before. Rosie followed Chester everywhere, chattering away to the old dog like he could understand every word. Her laughter, when it finally came, was like sunshine breaking through clouds. It filled the cabin with a warmth that had nothing to do with the fireplace. And Lily. She was the hardest to reach. She didn't ask for anything, didn't complain, didn't cry. She just watched and waited, like she was expecting Robert to give up on them any second. But she started doing little things. Washing dishes without being asked. Sweeping the floor. Organizing the bookshelf. Like she was trying to earn her place there. One morning, Robert found her outside trying to fix a broken shutter that had been hanging crooked for months. She had his tools spread out on the ground and was studying the problem with intense concentration. "Need some help?" Robert asked. Lily jumped, startled. "I was just trying to make myself useful. So you wouldn't get tired of us being here?" Robert's heart cracked right open. He knelt down beside her in the snow. "Lily, you don't have to earn your place here. You and your brother and sister, you're not a burden. You understand me? Lily's tough mask slipped for just a second and Robert saw the scared little girl underneath. Everyone else got tired of us. We're too much trouble. Too many kids. Well, I ain't everyone else, Robert said firmly. And you're not trouble. You're just kids who deserve a home. Now let me show you the right way to fix this shutter. Always good to know how to fix things. They worked together in comfortable silence, and when the shutter was fixed, Lily smiled. It was small and quick, but it was real. Robert felt something shift in his chest. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. That night, after the kids were asleep, Robert sat by the fire with Chester at his feet. He thought about his wife, about the son he'd lost, about the 12 years he'd spent hiding from the world. He told himself he was done with caring about people, that it hurt too much when you lost them. But these 3 kids had crashed into his life during a storm, and somehow they were melting the ice around his heart. He didn't know if he was doing the right thing. Didn't know if an old mountain man could really take care of 3 orphaned children. All he knew was that when Rosie called him Mr. Robert, with that sweet little voice, when Danny asked him to teach him something new, when Lily let her guard down even for a moment, he felt alive again. He felt needed, and maybe, just maybe, he needed them too. The word temporary didn't feel right anymore. But Robert was afraid to think too far ahead. Life had taught him that good things didn't last. He just hoped this time would be different. Spring came slowly to the mountain, but when it arrived, it brought new life to everything. The snow melted into rushing streams, wildflowers pushed through the dirt, and Robert's cabin transformed from a quiet bachelor's home into something he never expected. A real home, with laughter and arguing and mess and love. 3 months had passed since that stormy night. The county social workers called every few weeks, asking if Robert was managing okay, telling him they were still looking for a permanent placement. Each time Robert felt his stomach drop, but each time they said they hadn't found anyone yet. And each time Robert felt guilty for being relieved. The children had settled into routines. Robert enrolled them in Pine Ridge Elementary School, a small building with 3 classrooms that served all the mountain kids. The first day was rough. Lily refused to talk to anyone. Danny cried and said his stomach hurt. Rosie clung to Robert's leg and wouldn't let go. They'll be okay, the principal, Mrs. Walsh, said gently. Kids are tougher than we think. Robert wasn't so sure, but he drove away anyway. He spent the whole day worrying, checking the clock every 5 minutes. When he picked them up that afternoon, Danny ran to the truck with a big smile. I made a friend. His name is Tommy, and he has a dog too. Can Tommy come over sometime? Robert felt relief wash over him. Sure, kid, anytime. Rosie had survived too, though her teacher said she was very quiet. That was okay. She'd talk when she was ready. But Lily got into a fight. A boy had made fun of Danny for his worn-out shoes, and Lily punched him right in the nose. She sat in the truck with her arms crossed, waiting for Robert to yell at her. Instead, Robert said, "Fighting ain't the answer, but I understand why you did it. You're protecting your family. That's a good instinct. But next time, use your words first. Save the punches for when words don't work." Lily looked at him surprised. "You're not mad?" "Didn't say that. You'll be doing extra chores for a week. But I also understand. That boy shouldn't have said what he said." Robert glanced at her. "Also, when you punch someone, keep your thumb outside your fist. Otherwise, you'll break it. Your thumb, I mean." Lily couldn't help but smile. "You're weird, Mr. Robert." "Yeah, well, you're pretty weird yourself, kid." Life fell into patterns. Robert woke up early, made breakfast while the kids got ready for school. Usually burned the eggs because he was trying to do too many things at once. Danny would eat anything without complaining. Rosie picked at her food unless it was shaped like something fun. Lily always made sure her siblings ate before she did. After school, homework happened at the kitchen table. Robert wasn't much help with the schoolwork. He'd only finished 10th grade before joining the army. But he sat with them anyway, and they figured it out together. Danny was good at reading. Rosie loved coloring. Lily struggled with everything but never asked for help until Robert insisted. Evenings were Robert's favorite time. He'd teach the kids about the mountain. They learned to identify animal tracks in the mud. Danny could now tell the difference between a deer print and an elk print just by looking. They learned which plants were safe to eat and which ones to avoid. Rosie collected wildflowers and pressed them in an old book Robert found in the closet. He taught them practical skills too. How to chop kindling safely. How to start a fire when the wood was damp. How to read the sky to know when rain was coming. Lily took to these lessons like she'd been waiting her whole life to learn them. She had good hands and wasn't afraid of hard work. "Why do we need to know all this?" Danny asked one day while they were stacking firewood. "Because knowing how to take care of yourself is important," Robert said. "Can't always rely on other people to do things for you. Plus, there's satisfaction in doing something with your own hands. Makes you proud of yourself." The cabin itself changed too. Robert built bunk beds for the boys' room, which meant Danny finally had his own space. Lily got the small room that used to be storage. It wasn't much, just enough space for a bed and a dresser, but it was hers. She cried when she saw it, though she tried to hide it. Rosie still wanted to sleep near everyone else, so Robert set up a small bed in his room for her. He didn't mind. The kid had nightmares sometimes, and it was easier to comfort her when she was close. The town slowly got used to seeing Robert with 3 kids in tow. At first, people stared. The old hermit who never talked to anyone was suddenly buying school supplies and children's clothes at the general store. Robert heard the whispers, saw the curious looks. But he didn't care what people thought. These kids needed things, and he was going to provide them. Money was tight. Real tight. Robert did odd jobs around town to make ends meet. He repaired fences, chopped wood for folks, fixed broken equipment. His savings, which weren't much to begin with, disappeared quickly. Kids were expensive. They needed clothes that fit, school supplies, proper food. And they kept growing. Seemed like every month Danny's pants were too short. Tom, the sheriff, helped out when he could. He'd bring by bags of clothes his own kids had outgrown. Mrs. Walsh, the principal, somehow always had extra school supplies that she'd give to Robert with a knowing smile. The community, in its own quiet way, supported them. One Saturday afternoon, Robert took the kids to the town fair. It was a small event, just some craft booths and a few carnival games, but the kids' eyes lit up like it was Disneyland. Robert had saved up $30 for this, planning to let each kid pick one thing they wanted. Danny wanted to try the ring toss. He was terrible at it, missed every single shot, but he laughed the whole time. Rosie wanted cotton candy and got it all over her face, sticky and pink. Lily stood back, watching everything with those careful eyes, not asking for anything. "You get to pick something too," Robert told her. "I'm okay," Lily said. "Save the money." Lily. Robert knelt down so he was at her level. "You're allowed to want things. You're allowed to be a kid. Now pick something before I pick for you." She finally chose a book from one of the craft booths. It was a worn copy of a fantasy novel, and Lily held it like it was made of gold. That night, Robert caught her reading it by flashlight under her covers, completely lost in another world. It made him realize how little joy these kids had been allowed to have. But there were hard days too. Days when the kids fought with each other over nothing. Days when Rosie threw tantrums because she missed her parents. Days when Danny asked questions about the fire that Robert couldn't answer. Days when Lily shut down completely and wouldn't talk to anyone. The worst was when a social worker made a surprise visit to check on them. The kids panicked, thinking they were being taken away. Rosie cried so hard she made herself sick. Danny hid in the closet. Lily stood in front of her siblings like a guard dog, arms crossed, glaring at the social worker. "We're not going," Lily said firmly. "You can't make us." The social worker, a tired woman named Mrs. Peterson, sighed. "I'm not here to take you anywhere. I just need to check and make sure everything's okay." It took an hour to calm everyone down. Mrs. Peterson looked around the cabin, asked the kids questions, talked to Robert privately. When she left, she seemed satisfied, but the damage was done. The kids were reminded that this situation was temporary, that they could be moved at any time. That night, Robert made hot chocolate for everyone, even though it was too warm for it. They sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains. Chester lay at their feet, snoring softly. "Mr. Robert," Rosie asked in her tiny voice, "are you going to keep us?" Robert's throat got tight. He looked at these 3 kids who'd somehow become his whole world in just a few months. He thought about lying, telling them everything would be fine, but they deserved the truth. "I'm going to try my hardest," he said, "but I can't promise anything. The decision ain't just up to me. There's rules and laws and people who make these choices, but what I can promise is that I'll fight for you, and no matter what happens, I'm going to make sure you 3 stay together. That's what your parents would have wanted. That's what Patricia wanted, and that's what I want." Lily leaned against his shoulder, something she'd never done before. "We want to stay with you." "I want that too, kid. More than you know." They sat there as the stars came out, and Robert realized something that scared him. He'd spent 12 years building walls around his heart, and these 3 kids had knocked them all down in just a few months. He loved them, completely, terrifyingly, the way a father loves his children, and that meant he could lose them. That meant he could get hurt again, worse than before. But looking at Danny's smile, at Rosie's sticky cotton candy face, at Lily finally letting herself be a child, Robert knew it was too late to protect himself. He was all in. Whatever happened next, he was all in. It was a Tuesday morning in late May when everything changed. Robert was outside teaching Danny how to properly sharpen an axe when he heard a car struggling up the mountain road. Cars didn't come up here often. Usually it was just Tom checking in, or Mrs. Peterson from social services doing her monthly visit. But this car was different. It was a fancy silver sedan that had no business being on a dirt mountain road. Robert watched as it pulled up to the cabin, bumping over rocks and fallen branches. When the driver's door opened, out stepped a woman in a business suit and high heels. Actual high heels. On a mountain, she looked completely out of place. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Robert's truck. She picked her way carefully across the muddy yard, her heels sinking into the soft ground with each step. "Are you Robert Hayes?" she called out. "Depends on who's asking," Robert replied, immediately on guard. The woman reached the porch and extended her hand. "My name is Victoria Barnes. I'm an attorney from Denver. I've been looking for the Mitchell children for quite some time." Robert felt his heart drop into his stomach. Mitchell. That was the kid's last name. He shook her hand slowly, his mind racing. "What do you want with them?" "May I come inside?" "This is a rather complicated matter, and I'd prefer to discuss it privately." Robert didn't want to let her in. Every instinct told him this woman was going to take his kids away. But he couldn't just leave her standing on the porch either. "Fine, but keep your voice down. The little one's still sleeping." Inside, Lily was reading at the kitchen table while Rosie napped on the couch. Lily looked up when they entered, and Robert saw fear flash across her face. She'd gotten good at recognizing official-looking adults. They usually meant bad news. "It's okay," Robert said quietly. "Just someone who needs to talk to me. Why don't you take your book outside?" Lily hesitated, but she gathered her things and went out, though Robert knew she'd be listening at the window. That kid didn't miss anything. Victoria sat at the kitchen table, carefully placing her briefcase in front of her. Robert offered her coffee, which she accepted. He poured 2 cups and sat across from her, waiting. "Mr. Hayes, how much do you know about the children's family history?" Victoria asked. "I know their parents died in a fire. I know they've been in the system for about 8 months before they ended up here." "That's about it," Victoria nodded. "Then you don't know about their grandfather?" The children's mother had a father named William Mitchell. He was quite wealthy, made his fortune in software development back in the 90s, then invested wisely. When he passed away 6 months ago, he left everything to his grandchildren. Robert stared at her. "What do you mean, everything?" "I mean his entire estate. His company, his investments, his properties. All of it goes to Lily, Danny, and Rosie when they turn 18. The estate is currently valued at approximately $6 million. The coffee mug slipped from Robert's hand, shattering on the floor. He barely noticed. $6 million? Give or take, depending on market conditions. Victoria pulled some papers from her briefcase. "I've been trying to locate the children since Mr. Mitchell's death, but they were lost in the foster system. Different placements, paperwork errors. It wasn't until last week that I finally traced them here." Robert's mind was spinning. Those 3 kids sleeping in his cabin, eating cheap cereal for breakfast, wearing secondhand clothes. They were millionaires. It didn't make sense. "Why didn't anyone know about this?" Robert asked. "Why didn't the social workers know?" The children's mother and William Mitchell were estranged. They had a falling out years ago over family matters. He wanted to control her life. She wanted independence. They hadn't spoken in over a decade. So when she and her husband died, no one thought to contact William. And when he died shortly after, no one knew where his grandchildren were. "What does this mean? Are you taking them away?" Victoria's expression softened slightly. "It's not that simple. William's will has specific conditions. The money is held in trust until the children are adults. But the will states that they must be raised together in a stable, loving environment. If they're separated or placed in institutional care, the money goes to charity. Robert felt like he'd been punched. So you're saying if they get split up, they lose everything? Exactly. Which is why I need to evaluate their current situation. I need to ensure that they're together, safe and properly cared for. If this placement meets the requirements of the will, then the trust can start providing for their needs. And if it doesn't meet requirements, then I have to find a placement that does. The will is very specific about this. Robert stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see Lily sitting on the porch steps, pretending to read but obviously watching the cabin. Danny was throwing sticks for Chester. Everything looked so normal, so perfect, and now this woman was here to possibly rip it all apart. These kids have been through hell, Robert said quietly. Their parents died. Their grandfather, who they never even knew, died. They've been shuffled around like unwanted packages. They finally got somewhere they feel safe, and now you show up talking about money and conditions. I understand this is difficult, Victoria said, but I have a legal obligation to ensure the terms of the will are met. That means I need to spend some time here, observe how the children are doing, assess whether this environment is appropriate. Appropriate? Robert turned to face her, anger rising in his chest. These kids are loved. They're fed, clothed, safe. They go to school. They're happy. What more do they need? Legally? Quite a bit, actually. The trust has standards. Adequate housing, access to medical care, educational opportunities, long-term stability. No offense, Mr. Hayes, but you're a 63-year-old man living alone in a cabin with no retirement savings and limited income. How are you planning to provide for 3 growing children? Before Robert could answer, the door opened. Lily stood there, her face pale, her fists clenched at her sides. We don't want the money, she said loudly. We don't want anything from him. Victoria looked surprised. Lily, I'm not here to hurt you. This money is your inheritance. It's meant to take care of you. Money is what tore our family apart. Lily's voice was shaking. Mom used to tell us about how her father tried to buy her, control her. How he said she wasn't good enough because she didn't want his money. She ran away from all that and she was happy. We were happy before the fire. Robert moved to Lily's side, putting a hand on her shoulder. It's okay, kid. No, it's not. Lily looked up at him with tears in her eyes. She's going to take us away. She's going to say we need better stuff, fancier things. But we don't, we just need to stay together. We just need you. Robert's heart broke and swelled at the same time. He looked at Victoria. You heard her. The kids are happy here. Isn't that what matters? Victoria sighed and closed her briefcase. What matters is that I follow the law and the terms of the will. I'm not the enemy here, Mr. Hayes. I'm trying to protect these children and their future. But I need to do my due diligence. How long? Robert asked. I'd like to stay in the area for 2 weeks, observe the children, talk to their teachers, assess the living situation. I'll stay at the inn in town and come by regularly. If everything checks out, I can authorize the trust to start providing for their immediate needs while they remain in your care. And if things don't check out, Victoria met his eyes, then we'll have to make other arrangements. But I'm hoping it won't come to that. Despite what Lily thinks, I'm not here to ruin anyone's life. I'm here to make sure 3 orphan children get what their grandfather wanted them to have. A real home. After Victoria left, Robert sat on the porch with all 3 kids. Rosie had woken up and sensed something was wrong. She sat in Robert's lap, sucking her thumb. Danny leaned against his side. Lily sat on the step, her arms wrapped around her knees. Is she going to take us away? Rosie asked in her small voice. Not if I can help it, Robert said. But she's going to be around for a couple weeks watching us. Making sure you kids are okay. We're better than okay, Danny said. We're good here. Can't she see that? Sometimes grown-ups need proof of things that kids already know, Robert said. So we're just going to keep living our lives like normal. Go to school, do our chores, be a family, and hopefully she'll see what I see. What do you see? Lily asked quietly. Robert looked at each of them. I see 3 brave kids who've survived more than most adults ever have to face. I see a family that chose each other instead of being born to each other. And I see my reason for getting up every morning. Lily wiped her eyes. Even if we're rich, we're still just us, right? Money doesn't change who you are inside, Robert said. Though I gotta admit, the idea of fixing the roof with money that's not coming out of my grocery budget sounds pretty nice. That got a small laugh from Danny. Even Lily smiled a little. But Robert could see the fear still in their eyes. They'd been disappointed too many times to believe everything would work out, and honestly, Robert was scared too. Because Victoria was right about one thing. He was old, poor, and living in a cabin that barely had running water. He loved these kids more than anything, but was love enough? Could he really give them everything they needed? Victoria Barnes spent the next 2 weeks becoming a shadow in their lives. She showed up at unexpected times. Morning, afternoon, evening. Always watching. Always taking notes in that leather journal she carried. At first, it made everyone nervous. The kids were on their best behavior, which actually made things worse because they acted stiff and unnatural. By the third day, Robert had enough. "Look," he told Victoria when she arrived that morning. "You want to see how we really live? Then stop sneaking around like you're trying to catch us doing something wrong. Just come in, sit down, and be part of things. Otherwise, all you're going to see is 4 people pretending to be something they're not." Victoria seemed surprised by his directness. But she nodded and put away her notebook. Fair enough, so she started joining them for breakfast. She helped Rosie with her morning routine, braiding her hair when Robert's rough hands couldn't manage it. She sat quietly while Robert checked Danny's homework. She even went with them to school drop-off, observing how the kids interacted with their teachers and classmates. What Victoria saw was a family that worked despite all odds. They weren't perfect. Far from it. Robert burned breakfast at least 3 times a week. The cabin was cluttered with kid stuff. Boots by the door, homework scattered on the table. Danny and Lily argued about whose turn it was to feed Chester. Rosie had a meltdown when she couldn't find her favorite stuffed rabbit. But Victoria also saw the love. She saw Robert patiently helping Lily with math, even though he barely understood it himself. She saw him teaching Danny how to tie fishing flies, praising the boy's improving skills. She watched him rock Rosie to sleep when she had a nightmare, singing an old army song in his rough voice until the little girl's breathing evened out. One afternoon, Victoria accompanied them on a walk through the woods. Robert was teaching the kids about the local ecosystem, pointing out different plants and animal tracks. Danny was fascinated by everything, asking a million questions. Even Lily seemed relaxed, her guard down as she identified a hawk circling overhead. "That's a red-tailed hawk," Lily said confidently. "You can tell by the wing pattern and the tail color." "Very good," Robert said with obvious pride. "You've been paying attention." Victoria watched this interaction and scribbled something in her notebook. Robert noticed and felt his stomach clench. What was she writing? Was this good enough? Did she see what he saw? That evening, Victoria stayed for dinner. It was simple, just stew and bread, but the kids chattered happily about their day. Rosie demonstrated a new song she'd learned in school. Danny showed off a drawing he'd made. Lily remained quieter, but she smiled occasionally. After dinner, while Robert washed dishes and the kids played outside with Chester, Victoria stood beside him at the sink. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Hayes?" she said. "Depends on the question. Why are you doing this? You could have called social services that first night and washed your hands of the whole situation. Instead, you took in 3 traumatized children who aren't even related to you. Why?" Robert was quiet for a moment, watching the kids through the window. "I lost my wife and son 12 years ago. Spent all that time telling myself I was better off alone, that caring about people just led to pain. Then these 3 showed up in the middle of a storm and something changed. Maybe they needed me or maybe I needed them. Either way, I can't imagine my life without them now." "You know you're not a young man," Victoria said gently. "What happens when you get older? Who takes care of them then? We'll figure it out when we get there. That's what families do. They figure things out together." Victoria went back to her notebook, but Robert couldn't read her expression. The second week, Victoria branched out beyond the cabin. She visited Pine Ridge Elementary and spoke with Mrs. Walsh, the principal, and each of the kids' teachers. Robert waited anxiously at home, wondering what they were telling her. Were they saying good things? Bad things? When Victoria returned, she looked thoughtful but didn't share what she'd learned. Instead, she asked to see the cabin more thoroughly. She checked the bedrooms, the bathroom, the kitchen. She noted the leaky roof, the old pipes, the inadequate heating system. "The structure is sound," she said, "but there are issues. The roof needs replacing. The plumbing should be updated. And this cabin is small for 4 people. There's no privacy for growing children." Robert felt defensive. "It's not fancy, but it's safe. And the kids don't seem to mind." "I'm not criticizing you, Mr. Hayes. I'm assessing needs. If the children remain here, the trust can fund necessary improvements. But I need to be honest in my report about the current conditions. She also raised concerns about medical care. The nearest hospital was an hour away. What if there was an emergency? What about regular checkups, dental care, eye exams? Robert admitted he hadn't taken the kids for any of that yet. He'd been focused on just keeping them fed and stable. These things matter, Victoria said. Children need proper health care. It's not optional. Robert knew she was right, but it stung anyway. He'd been doing his best with limited resources, and now someone was pointing out all the ways he was falling short. Then Victoria asked to speak with each child privately. Robert's heart raced. What would they say? Would they admit they wanted to leave? That they deserved better than an old man in a rundown cabin? She spoke with Rosie first in the small bedroom while Robert waited outside. He could hear Rosie's voice, bright and cheerful, but couldn't make out the words. When they emerged, Rosie ran to Robert and hugged his leg. I told her you're the best papa, Rosie whispered loudly. Robert's throat tightened. Papa. She'd been calling him that for weeks now, and each time it made his heart swell. Danny was next. He was in there longer, and when he came out, his eyes were red like he'd been crying. But he smiled at Robert. I told her the truth, was all he said. Finally, Lily. Robert was most worried about her. She was the oldest, the most aware of their situation. If anyone would be realistic about their circumstances, it would be Lily. She was in Victoria's makeshift office, the small room that used to be storage, for almost an hour. When the door finally opened, Lily came out with her jaw set, her eyes fierce. She looked at Robert and nodded once, then went outside. Victoria stayed in the room for a few more minutes, writing in her notebook. That night, Robert couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, listening to Rosie's soft breathing from her little bed across the room, and wondered if this was the last night they'd all be together. Had he done enough? Had the kids said the right things? Was his love for them enough to overcome all the practical concerns Victoria had raised? The next morning, Victoria asked everyone to sit together in the living room. Robert's heart pounded. This was it. The verdict. I've completed my assessment, Victoria began. I've spoken with teachers, the sheriff, members of the community, and most importantly, with each of you. I've evaluated the living conditions, the financial situation, and the overall well-being of the children. Robert held his breath. Lily grabbed his hand on one side, Danny on the other. Rosie climbed into his lap. There are concerns, Victoria continued. The cabin needs significant repairs. Medical and dental care has been neglected. Mr. Hayes has no retirement plan and limited income. By conventional standards, this placement has numerous deficiencies. Robert felt his world crashing down. He pulled the kids closer. However, Victoria said, and her voice softened, I've also seen something that can't be measured by conventional standards. I've seen 3 children who were lost and broken begin to heal. I've seen them laugh, feel safe, and start to trust again. Every teacher I spoke with remarked on their improvement. Mrs. Walsh told me that when these children first arrived at school, they were withdrawn and fearful. Now they participate, make friends, and show genuine enthusiasm for learning. She looked directly at Robert. Sheriff Bradley told me something interesting. He said that in all the years he's known you, he's never seen you smile. Not once, but in the past 6 months he says you've become a different person, more open, more engaged with the community. He said these children didn't just find a home with you. You found a home with them. Robert's vision blurred with tears he was trying to hold back. Most importantly, Victoria said, I spoke with each child privately, and they all said the same thing in different ways. They feel loved here. They feel safe. They want to stay. Lily said something that particularly struck me. She said, Mr. Robert taught us that family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up every day and trying your best. Victoria closed her notebook. Based on my assessment, I'm recommending that the children remain in your care. Mr. Hayes, the trust will be authorized to provide for their needs, including home improvements, medical care, educational expenses, and a modest monthly allowance for their general care. You won't have access to the principal amount, but you'll have the resources to raise these children properly. Robert couldn't hold back anymore. Tears rolled down his face as relief flooded through him. The kids were crying too, even Lily. They all held each other, a tangle of arms and tears and joy. There is one condition, Victoria added. I'll be checking in regularly. Every few months I'll visit to ensure everything continues to meet the trust's requirements. These children are precious. The news spread faster than wildfire through dry grass. 3 orphan kids living on the mountain with old Robert Hayes were actually millionaires. $6 million. The number got bigger with each retelling. Some folks said it was 10 million. Others swore it was 20. It started small. People Robert barely knew suddenly became friendly. The woman who ran the general store started giving the kids extra candy. The mechanic who usually charged Robert full price suddenly offered discounts. At first, Robert thought people were just being kind. Then he realized they were being strategic. "Heard about the kids' good fortune," the mechanic said one day while changing the oil in Robert's truck. "Must be nice having that kind of security. You ever need anything at all, you just let me know. I'm here to help." Robert paid for the oil change and left, feeling uneasy. The friendliness felt fake, like people were positioning themselves for something. But the real trouble started 3 weeks after Victoria returned to Denver. Robert was in town picking up supplies when Sheriff Tom pulled him aside. "We need to talk," Tom said, his face serious. "Somewhere private." They went to Tom's office and the sheriff closed the door. "You got a problem, Robert." A woman named Jennifer Hartley filed paperwork claiming she's the kid's cousin. Says she wants custody. Robert felt his stomach drop. Cousin? The kids never mentioned any cousin. Apparently she's their mother's second cousin or something. Real distant relation. But she's claiming she's been trying to find the kids for months, wanting to take them in. "That's bull," Robert said angrily. "If she wanted them so bad, where was she 8 months ago when they were bouncing between foster homes?" Tom held up his hands. "I'm just telling you what I know. And it gets worse. The kids also have an uncle on their father's side. Guy named Raymond Mitchell. He showed up at social services yesterday saying he should have custody." Robert stood up, pacing the small office. "Let me guess. Nobody heard from Raymond when the kids needed help. But now that there's money involved, suddenly he's interested in being family." "That's what I'm thinking too. But legally, blood relatives do have some standing in custody cases, especially when the current guardian is technically still a temporary placement." "I have legal custody," Robert protested. "The trust approved me. The trust approved you financially. But you never formally adopted the kids. On paper, you're still just a foster placement. That makes you vulnerable." Robert felt panic rising in his chest. "What do I need to do?" "Get yourself a lawyer. A good one. Because I got a feeling this is just the beginning." Tom was right. Over the next few weeks, more people came out of the woodwork. An aunt nobody had heard from. A family friend who claimed to be like a godmother. Even a couple who said they'd been neighbors with the kids' parents and always wanted children of their own. Each one had the same story. They'd been trying to find the kids, wanted to help, felt it was their duty to take them in. And every single one appeared right after the news about the inheritance spread. The worst was Raymond. He was smooth, polished, and knew exactly what to say. He showed up at the school one day, charming the staff with stories about his brother, the kid's father. He brought photographs, shared memories, and made himself seem like the perfect guardian. When Robert heard about it, he drove straight to the school. He found Raymond in the parking lot getting into an expensive car. "Stay away from those kids," Robert said, his voice low and dangerous. Raymond turned with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Hayes, I've been wanting to meet you. I'm Raymond Mitchell, the children's uncle. Their actual blood relative. I know who you are. I also know you refused to take them when their parents died." The social worker noted it in their file. "You said 3 kids were too much responsibility." Raymond's smile faltered for just a second. "I was in a difficult financial position at the time. Things have changed. I'm in a much better place now to provide for them. Bet you are. Funny how things changed right around the same time you heard about the money." "This isn't about money," Raymond said, but his voice had an edge now. "This is about family. Those children belong with blood relatives who can give them the life they deserve, not some old man living in poverty in the woods. Those kids have a home. They're happy. They're healing. And I'm not going to let you or anyone else rip them away for money. We'll see what the courts say about that." Raymond got in his car. "By the way, you should know I've already filed for custody. My lawyer says I have an excellent case. Blood relation, stable income, proper housing. You're just a temporary placement who got lucky. That luck's about to run out." Robert watched him drive away, his hands shaking with anger. When he got home, the kids immediately knew something was wrong. "What happened?" Lily asked. Robert sat them down and told them the truth. He'd learned that lying to them, even to protect them, didn't help. They needed to know what they were facing. "People want to take us away?" Danny's voice was small and scared. Because of the money? They're trying, Robert said. But I'm not going to let them succeed. Rosie started crying. I don't want to leave. I want to stay with you. Robert pulled her into his lap. I know, sweetheart. I want that too. And we're going to fight. But fighting required money, and Robert didn't have much. He called Victoria, who said the trust could provide some funds for legal representation, but there were limits. The money was meant for the kids' care, not legal battles. The lawyer Victoria recommended, a man named Frank Cooper, was honest about their situation. Blood relatives have strong standing in custody cases, especially when they can provide material advantages. A judge is going to look at what each home can offer these children. So what do? Robert asked. We prove that the kids are better off with you. We show their progress, their stability, their happiness. We expose these relatives for what they are, people motivated by money, not love. But I'll be honest with you, Mr. Hayes, it's going to be an uphill battle. The kids became anxious and fearful. Lily stopped eating properly. Danny started having nightmares again. Rosie wouldn't let Robert out of her sight, terrified that if she did, someone would take her away. The school noticed the change too. Mrs. Walsh called Robert in for a meeting. The children are regressing, she said gently. They're anxious, distracted. Danny got into a fight yesterday, which is completely unlike him. Lily failed a test she should have aced, and Rosie cries every day at drop-off. I know, Robert said, feeling helpless. They're scared. Hell, I'm scared too. What can we do to help? Just keep treating them normal. Let them know they're safe at school at least. The community, the real community that had supported them from the start, rallied around them. Mrs. Walsh wrote a letter to the court about the children's progress. Tom did the same. Even some of Robert's customers wrote statements about what they'd observed, but Raymond and Jennifer had their own ammunition. They hired expensive lawyers and started painting a picture of Robert as unfit. Too old, too poor, living in inadequate conditions. They brought up his hermit years, twisting his grief into something that sounded like mental instability. The custody hearing was set for 6 weeks away. 6 weeks of uncertainty, 6 weeks of watching the kids he loved suffer, 6 weeks of wondering if loving them was going to be enough. One night after the kids were finally asleep, Robert sat alone on the porch with Chester. He felt old and tired and scared. What if he wasn't enough? What if the judge decided that blood and money were more important than love? Tom stopped by with a 6-pack of beer. They sat in silence for a while, just drinking and staring at the stars. You're doing the right thing fighting for them, Tom finally said. Doesn't feel like it. Feels like I'm being selfish putting them through all this stress. You know what's selfish? Those vultures circling, pretending to care about kids they ignored for months. You're the one who was there when they needed someone. You're the one who loved them when they had nothing. That counts for something. Hope the judge sees it that way. Me too, my friend. Me too. The next morning, Lily came to Robert while he was making breakfast. She'd been up early, he could tell. Her eyes had that tired look that came from not sleeping. I've been thinking, she said.
What if we told them we don't want the money?
Would they leave us alone then? Robert's heart broke. Oh, Lily, it doesn't work like that. The money's yours whether you want it or not. And these people, they'd probably fight over who gets to control it until you're old enough. I hate it, Lily said fiercely. I hate that stupid money. It's ruining everything. Money doesn't ruin things, people do. People who think money is more important than what really matters. What really matters? Robert looked at his kitchen full of kid drawings on the walls, homework scattered on the table, Chester sleeping in his favorite spot. This family love showing up every day, that's what matters. Then why doesn't the court see that? I don't know, kid. But we're gonna make them see it. We're gonna fight with everything we've got. Because you three are worth fighting for. Lily hugged him, something she rarely did. Promise you won't give up? I promise. They'd have to drag me away kicking and screaming before I'd let you go. But as the hearing date got closer, Robert wondered if promises were enough. Raymond and Jennifer were preparing their cases, hiring experts, gathering evidence. The courthouse in Denver was nothing like Pine Ridge. Everything was marble and glass, cold and intimidating. Robert walked through the doors holding Rosie's hand, with Danny on his other side and Lily walking slightly ahead. Her shoulders squared like she was heading into battle. Frank Cooper, their lawyer, met them in the hallway. He looked nervous, which didn't make Robert feel any better. Remember what we talked about. Be honest, be yourself, and trust the process. Easy for you to say, Robert muttered. The courtroom was already filling up. Raymond sat on one side with his lawyers, 3 of them, all in expensive suits. Jennifer was there too, with her own legal team. They'd apparently decided to team up, both claiming they could provide better homes than Robert. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Judge Anderson was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She looked at the file in front of her, then at everyone in the courtroom. This is a custody hearing regarding 3 minor children, Lily, Danny, and Rosie Mitchell, currently placed with Mr. Robert Hayes, with petitions from Mr. Raymond Mitchell and Miss Jennifer Hartley seeking custody. Let's begin. Raymond's lawyer went first. He was good. Really good. He painted Raymond as a successful businessman with a beautiful home, excellent income, and the ability to provide every advantage. He showed photographs of Raymond's house, a huge place with a pool and a big backyard. He talked about private schools, music lessons, sports programs. These children have suffered tremendous loss, the lawyer said. They deserve stability, opportunity, and the resources to thrive. Mr. Mitchell can provide all of that. He's their blood relative, their father's brother. Family should be with family. Then it was Jennifer's turn. Her lawyer did something similar, showing off her credentials, her nice apartment in the city, her stable job. She cried while talking about the children's mother, claiming they'd been close as kids, though Robert suspected that was exaggerated. Finally, it was Frank's turn to present Robert's case. He called witnesses. Mrs. Walsh testified about the children's remarkable progress in school. Tom talked about how Robert had transformed from a recluse into an engaged member of the community. The kids' doctors reported that they were healthy and well cared for. Then Victoria took the stand. Robert hadn't known she was coming. She spoke about her investigation, about what she'd observed in Robert's home. I've evaluated hundreds of placements in my career, Victoria said. I've seen wealthy homes that were emotionally barren and modest homes that were filled with love. What matters isn't the size of the house or the amount in the bank account. What matters is whether children feel safe, valued, and loved. In my professional opinion, these children have that with Mr. Hayes. Raymond's lawyer cross-examined her aggressively. But wouldn't the children have more opportunities with my client? Better schools, better health care, better everything? Opportunities mean nothing if a child is emotionally damaged, Victoria replied calmly. These children were traumatized. They were finally healing. Uprooting them again, away from the person they've bonded with, could cause significant psychological harm. Then the judge did something unexpected. She called each child into her chambers privately to speak with them. One by one. First Rosie, then Danny, then Lily. Robert waited in agony. What were they saying? Were they scared? Did they understand what was happening? Rosie came out first, her eyes red from crying. She ran straight to Robert and buried her face in his chest. I told her I want to stay with Papa Robert, she whispered. Danny was in there longer. When he emerged, he looked exhausted but determined. He gave Robert a small nod. Then it was Lily's turn. She was in the judge's chambers for almost 30 minutes. Robert's heart pounded the entire time. Lily was smart, articulate. She could advocate for herself and her siblings. But she was also just 12 years old, dealing with more than any kid should have to. When the door finally opened, Lily walked out slowly. Her face was blotchy from crying, but her eyes were fierce. She looked at Robert and he saw something there. Trust. Love. Hope. The judge returned to the bench and looked at all the adults in the courtroom. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony. I've spoken with the children, and I've given this matter considerable thought. Robert felt like he couldn't breathe. Mr. Mitchell, Miss Hartley, I understand your desire to provide for these children. On paper, you both offer material advantages that Mr. Hayes cannot match. However, this case isn't about what looks good on paper. It's about what's best for 3 traumatized children who've already lost too much. She turned to Raymond. Mr. Mitchell, social services records show that you declined to take these children when they first entered the system. You stated at that time that you weren't equipped to handle 3 children. Now, coincidentally, after learning of their inheritance, you've had a change of heart. I find that timing troubling. Raymond's face flushed red. The judge looked at Jennifer. Miss Hartley, you claim to have been close with the children's mother, yet there's no evidence of any contact between you in the past decade. No phone calls, no letters, no visits. That doesn't suggest the kind of relationship that would make you a natural guardian for her children. Jennifer opened her mouth to protest, but the judge held up her hand. More importantly, I've spoken with the children themselves, and their wishes are clear and consistent. Rosie told me, and I quote, "Papa Robert makes me feel safe and teaches me things and loves me even when I'm bad." Danny said that Mr. Hayes taught him that real strength comes from kindness, and that he finally feels like he has a home. And Lily, the judge paused, looking at Lily with something like respect. Lily told me something I found particularly insightful. She said that when her parents died, she felt like she died too, that she was just going through the motions, protecting her siblings but feeling nothing herself. She said Mr. Hayes was the first person who let her be angry and sad without trying to fix her, who showed her that it's okay to not be okay, who taught her family isn't about perfection, it's about showing up every single day. Robert's vision blurred with tears. He looked at Lily and she was crying too. These children don't need a bigger house or fancier schools, the judge continued. They need what they finally found: stability, safety, unconditional love. And they found that with Mr. Hayes. However, the judge said, and Robert's heart sank, I do have concerns about the long-term sustainability of this placement. Mr. Hayes, you're 63 years old with limited income and no retirement plan. What happens as you age? What happens if you become ill? Frank stood up. Your Honor, the Children's Trust has been authorized to provide for their needs, including home improvements and a monthly allowance for their care. I'm aware of that, the judge said. But financial support isn't the only issue. Mr. Hayes, do you understand the commitment you're making? Raising 3 children from ages 5, 9, and 12 means you'll be actively parenting well into your 70s. Robert stood up, even though he wasn't sure if he was supposed to. Your Honor, I know I'm old. I know I'm not rich or fancy. I know I'm not what people picture when they think of the perfect parent. But those kids are my family now. I'd walk through fire for them. And yeah, maybe I'll need a cane in a few years, or maybe my hearing will get worse. But my love for them won't change. And I'll be there for them every single day I've got left on this earth. The courtroom was silent. The judge studied Robert for a long moment. Mr. Hayes, I'm granting you permanent legal custody of all 3 children, with the condition that you initiate adoption proceedings within 6 months. The children will remain with you. Their trust will continue to provide for their material needs, with Miss Barnes maintaining oversight. Mr. Mitchell, Miss Hartley, your petitions are denied. Raymond jumped to his feet. This is ridiculous. I'm appealing this decision. That's your right, the judge said calmly. But I should warn you, appeals rarely succeed in cases where the children's preferences are this clear, and the current placement is this stable. You'd be wasting your money and, more importantly, continuing to traumatize children who've already been through enough. Something in Raymond's face changed. He looked at the kids, really looked at them for the first time. They were all crying, holding onto Robert like he was their lifeline. And maybe he saw what everyone else saw, that this wasn't about money or houses or opportunities. It was about love. He sat back down slowly. I withdraw my appeal. Jennifer looked like she wanted to keep fighting, but her lawyer whispered something to her, and she reluctantly nodded. I withdraw as well. The judge banged her gavel. Then we're done here. Mr. Hayes, take your children home. The courtroom erupted. Victoria was hugging everyone. Tom was shaking Robert's hand. Frank was grinning ear to ear. But all Robert could focus on was the 3 kids who were wrapped around him, crying and laughing at the same time. We get to stay? Danny asked, like he couldn't quite believe it. Forever, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. You're stuck with me now. Good, Lily said fiercely. Because we're not going anywhere. Outside the courthouse, Raymond approached them one last time. Robert tensed, ready to protect the kids. But Raymond just stood there looking awkward and ashamed. 1 year later, the cabin barely looked like the same place. The roof was fixed, solid and new. No more buckets catching drips when it rained. The plumbing actually worked properly now. There was a new heating system that kept them warm even on the coldest nights. But the best addition was the small extension Robert and the kids had built together over the summer. It wasn't fancy, just 2 new bedrooms, so the kids each had their own space. Danny had helped Robert with every nail and board, learning construction skills that made him beam with pride. Lily had designed the layout, practical and efficient. Even Rosie had helped, painting the walls her favorite shade of purple. The cabin was bigger now, but it still felt cozy, still felt like home, because they'd been careful to keep what made it special. The stone fireplace where they gathered on cold nights, the porch where they sat and watched the sunset, the big kitchen table where homework and meals and important conversations happened. Robert stood at that table now, making breakfast while the kids got ready for school. It was early October, exactly 1 year since that storm had changed all their lives. He'd gotten better at cooking over the past year, though he still burned things occasionally. This morning was scrambled eggs and toast, and he'd only burned one piece of toast. "Morning, Dad," Danny said, sliding into his chair. Dad. Not Mr. Robert anymore, just Dad. Robert would never get tired of hearing it. "Morning, kiddo. Sleep okay?" "Yeah, I'm excited about today. We're doing experiments in science class." Lily came in next, already dressed and organized. She'd grown 3 inches in the past year and was turning into a confident young woman. Still guarded sometimes, still protective of her siblings, but she smiled more now, laughed more, let herself be 13. "There's a notice about parent-teacher conferences," Lily said, putting a paper on the table. "Next week, Mrs. Walsh wants to talk about my application to the advanced program." Robert felt pride swell in his chest. "That's great, Lily. We'll definitely be there." Finally, Rosie appeared, still in her pajamas, dragging her stuffed rabbit. She was 6 now, had lost 2 baby teeth, and was much more confident than the scared little girl who'd arrived in the storm. "Don't want to go to school," she mumbled, climbing into Robert's lap. "Why not? You love school." "Tommy said his family is moving away. He's my best friend." Robert hugged her. "I know, sweetheart, that's hard. But you'll make new friends. And you can write letters to Tommy. Can we send him emails instead? Letters take too long." Robert smiled. They had internet now, part of the improvements. He'd been dragged into the modern age by these kids, learning about computers and phones and all the technology he'd avoided for years. "Yeah, we can do emails." After breakfast, they piled into Robert's truck for the drive to school. It was the same old truck, but it ran better now after some much-needed repairs. The kids chattered about their day, making plans for after school. Danny wanted to work on the treehouse they were building. Lily needed quiet time for homework. Rosie wanted to bake cookies. At school, Robert walked them to the entrance like he did every morning. Some of the other parents nodded hello. He'd become a familiar sight over the past year. No longer the strange hermit from the mountain, but just another dad dropping off his kids. Mrs. Walsh caught him before he left. "Mr. Hayes, do you have a minute?" They stepped aside, and Mrs. Walsh smiled warmly. "I just wanted to tell you how remarkable the children's progress has been. Lily is at the top of her class. Danny's confidence has grown so much. And Rosie is like a different child from last year. You should be very proud." "I am," Robert said. "They've worked hard. You've worked hard too. Not every parent would have done what you've done." She paused. "There's a father-daughter dance next month. I know Lily acts tough, but I think she'd really love it if you took her." Robert felt nervous. "I don't really dance. Neither do most of the fathers, but the girls don't care. They just want to spend time with their dads." She patted his arm. "Think about it." On the drive back to the cabin, Robert thought about everything that had changed in a year. The house, the kids, himself. He was 64 now, with more gray hair and reading glasses he actually had to use. But he felt younger somehow, more alive. The trust money had made things easier, no question. They could afford decent food, new clothes when needed, proper medical care. The kids had seen the dentist for the first time in years. Danny needed glasses, which he'd been too embarrassed to admit before. Rosie got treatment for mild asthma they didn't even know she had, but the money hadn't changed what mattered. They still ate dinner together every night, still did chores together on weekends. Still,